Hello and welcome back to the vlog. Today, episode 3, we're talking about change mindset. What is the mindset that you need to have when you approach working on your relationship, especially when it's something new for you? The question I would ask is, what does the best version of your relationship look like? Is it something obvious to you? Is it where you are today? Is it something that is sustainable over your lifetime? We know that brushing our teeth is the key to good dental hygiene, but what's the equivalent for your relationship? That's not so clear, and what we want to do here at Kinship is help you answer that question and then give you the tools so that you can brush your teeth, your emotional teeth. You want your connection to thrive with your partner, not just survive and get by and be good enough, but to really have it be the most fulfilling and meaningful part of your life. But in addition to what I'll call probably obvious reasons why you'd want to commit and work hard at your relationship, there's a lot of other benefits. There's something out there called the Grant Study, which is one of the, if not the longest longitudinal study ever done, and it measures a whole host of things, but the only consistent finding that impacts across the 3 main areas of happiness, health outcomes, and longevity is a secure connection with another human being. If we don't have that, then we're more prone to illness, we are less happy, and we'll die sooner. It's the best reason I can give you to say, hey, I already love this person, I'm committed to this person, and this is the key to living longer and happier and healthier. One of the other things I want to consider is the change of information that you're getting, the novelty of the research and the science behind it. And what I want to do for comparison is look back at some of the other technological advances that have occurred in the last 100 or so years, and then point out the fact that a lot of the relationship science that we're using is as old as some of those other inventions. So for instance, you had, the radio came out in 1906, and you've got the iPhone coming out in 2006. That's 100 years difference from being able to send the first broadcast radio signal to having the entire worlds of information in your pocket at your fingertips. Just even computers in the last 20 years, you will go from 3.5-inch floppy disks that have a megabyte of space on them to the USB thumb drives a day that have multiple terabytes. That's millions of times more information that we're cramming in here. There's this massive technological advances. If you could try and imagine living in 2019 and being reliant on radio and floppy disks for using what you would do in the technical world, that would be unfathomable. There's no way you would be able to survive in today's digital world using the tools that long ago. And yet, here we are using the thoughts and the theorems and the ideas of psychologists and researchers from 50 to 100 years ago. And there's no good reason for doing that except for the information hasn't gotten out where it needs to be. And the exercises that we're going to do are all going to be with science behind them, with research behind them, and most importantly, they're going to be measurable. And why is it important to be measurable? Well, we expect the change to occur to be incremental. It's going to be small. It's not going to be something where you go to bed one night, you wake up the next day, and you're a relationship superstar, and everything's great. So it'd be easy to say, try something out for a week, have it be difficult, and kind of give up on it because, where's the benefit? Where do I see that? So it's important to measure, especially if we're expecting incremental change, because that's going to help us chart our progress over time. So the mindset you want to have is be in it for the long term, mark what you're doing so that you can track and look back and say, that's where I was, this is where I am now. Wow, that actually is a big deal. The example I will give is if you're out of shape and you walk into a gym on Monday and you start to exercise, Friday afternoon, you're not going to walk out there as an Olympic athlete. It just doesn't work that way. The body takes time to respond. It takes time and consistency to build up muscle And that's the same thing that we're going to be doing here. It's going to take time and consistency. Another good analogy, if we want to stick with athletes, is that the way athletes practice and train is they're trying to train their body to do a physical activity in such that their body and their muscles have memorized the movements and the tasks that they perform. Shooting a basketball shot or hitting a golf ball, any number of things where the athlete wants to practice it so much that everything becomes so automatic that they can do this at the highest level without having to think about it. And you hear that phrase all the time, oh, that guy's in his head, or, they're getting into his head because he's overthinking it. And that is very true, because what happens is if your brain takes over and starts trying to think through, I might need to move my hand here and then release the ball here, you can't possibly have that kind of response relationship with your muscles when that's occurring. And you'll find that you get all sorts of out of sync with it. And it's the same thing with your body and your feelings and your relationship. If you end up winding yourself, getting into your head too much and trying to overthink what you're doing, it's not going to do it. And conversely, if you find yourself getting in your head too much, you're going to wind up in a lot of trouble. But also, if your body doesn't know, it hasn't been trained on what to do or how to respond in certain situations, you're also going to have a bad time, because what you will have learned is probably the wrong thing, and that's going to make things worse. So your options are go with what you know, which will probably land you in trouble, or try and overthink it, which is, if you've ever tried to, reason with somebody who's feeling strong feelings, that doesn't get you anywhere. Or we can learn and train a new muscle. The same principles about athletes training apply to your relationship as well. In working on your relationship, you're going to have to practice some things that are beyond your prefrontal cortex brain, what you can logic or reason through. And so your mindset has to be, I'm open to training a new type of muscle, right? You've got muscles in your body, you've got your brain and your intelligence in your head, and now here is your emotional body. And the neat thing about this is the strength and stamina of this muscle can be measured. Let me give you an example. Eye contact. Eye contact is the emotional exercise equivalent to a deadlift. It's a compound emotional exercise that engages your entire body and your entire systems. And we have the science that shows how important this is and how eye contact is essential to connection and safety, and lands in so many different places with your relationship. So for an exercise, imagine sitting down a few feet apart from your partner and just looking at each other in the eye. How long can you maintain eye contact before your mind starts to wander, before you start to say, feel awkward or uncomfortable, before you start to say things like, oh, this is stupid? How long can that last? And how long can you sort of look and gaze into each other's eyes? That is a muscle that most of us don't practice and most of us don't train, which is why we're going to find that activity so difficult to begin with. If you imagine going into the gym and having never worked out and try and go lift a really heavy bar, you're not going to be able to do it, right? So the mindset you want to have here, if this is something that you've never done, if this is something that's new to you, don't go in expecting to be able to lift that heavy bar. And so the key to doing a new heavy, crazy workout is having an open mind. Are you willing to learn new things? Are you willing to embrace new information? We've learned a lot about relationships over our lives. However, most of that's been from flawed sources. Most of us do not have not had somebody to model secure attachment for us in our life. And therefore, we have a lot of biases and a lot of assumptions about what works in a relationship. And so we have to bring new information to change that mindset. And that is no small task. That is the hard work right there. And so just being open to that is key in the mindset of beginning. Another thing, awareness. So we are a survival-oriented species. That's how we evolved. We have low levels of the brain quick thinking, knee-jerk parts of the brain that respond or that are constantly scanning for danger and threat. These parts of their brain require what I'm going to call error correction by the higher, slower functioning parts of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. Now, the problem with that is that the prefrontal cortex and the higher levels of the brain are very good at this, very good at error correction, but they take a lot of oxygen and glucose, a lot of resources. And when we're under stress, those parts of the brain are compromised and can't do it. And so you fall back to your lower levels of the brain, the more animalistic levels of the brain, which shoot first, ask questions later, which is great if you're trying to survive life or death situations, but not great when you're arguing with your spouse over who's late or who's wrong, who's at fault. One of the key parts of what we're going to do is try and work on bringing awareness to, what state of the brain am I operating in right now? And again, that's no small task either. And the important thing to remember here is we're not going for perfection. We're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to improve. We want to get a little bit better each and every day. We want to measure ourselves getting better so we can see our progress and be proud of it and work together. And over the long run, it's going to pay off enormously. Cooking one meal isn't enough to get healthy. Writing a single sentence is not enough to complete a novel. And being introspective and open with yourself is not enough to master self-regulation. But all of those things I just mentioned are the correct first steps on a journey. So I'll just recap real quick the mindset, the approach that we're taking. The first is we're going to start small and we're going to stay consistent. We expect change to happen incrementally, and we're going to be committed for the long run. The second thing, it's not about thinking, it's not about doing, it's not about fixing. It's about feeling, which we're going to admit is an entirely new muscle that we have to be aware of and work on. 3, we're going to have to look inside for the answers. And we have to understand that our relationships to ourselves are going to be the most important. It's going to be the key to everything. 4th, we're going to track and we're going to measure what we do because we want to know where we stand. We don't want it to be wishy-washy. We don't want it to be a guesswork. We want to know where we started, where we are, and where we want to get to. And last, we're not after perfection. It's not about never fighting with your partner or your spouse. It's about how well you can repair and connect afterwards. And the stronger these muscles are, the better you're going to be able to do that. So, what's next? We're going to start over the next few lessons about learning key concepts, and then we're going to outline and define a sort of workout or exercise that you can take with you and practice yourself and with your partner to start to build and strengthen these muscles. So stay tuned, and remember, you guys are in this together.